What up, gunfighters? So, as you might know, I am picking up some contracting work by God's grace. I went in today. I had to go to one of the three-letter government places and get my fingerprints done, and also went and talked to somebody running the contract or doing some stuff with the contract about gear. And I've said this before, but today just kind of drove that point home that oftentimes military, feds, they're about 20 years behind when it comes to gear and many other things. And that's no surprise here. And that got me thinking about common duty guns from the 90s and early aughts. So that's what we're going to talk about today. Common duty guns from the 90s and early aughts. I'm going to plug in the bio so you know that I have some kind of credibility on this topic. If you want to skip it, skip around 2 minutes and we'll get into the main topic. I'll roll into a quick abbreviated bio and then into the main topic. First and foremost, I am a Christian. I don't apologize for that. God is number one in my life. I grew up hunting and fishing in the backwoods of the southeastern United States at a very early age. Some of my earliest memories are with firearms. I joined the Marine Corps at 17, did a couple of combat tours in Iraq. By God's grace, He got me through that safely. After that, I served as an instructor, an urban warfare instructor and a desert warfare instructor for the United States Marine Corps. I also served with the LAPD, both full-time as a sworn police officer and in some more specialized assignments, as well as serving in the U.S. Army, full-time and part-time National Guard. I've been a FBI firearms instructor, still am an FBI firearms instructor, have been for a lot of years, also NRA certified and some other three-letter government agency certified. I've been a private contractor for a three-letter government agency I won't specify. I've been the commander of a tactical team in a large metropolitan area. By God's grace, He got me through all that in one piece, not because I'm better, but because He chose to have grace and mercy on me. I've been a professional hunter and guide. Professionally hunted things like buffalo and elk. Not many people today can say they've done that, but I'm blessed to be able to say that I have. I've hunted everything from white-tailed deer on the East Coast to mule deer on the West Coast to gray squirrel on the East Coast to prairie dog on the West Coast, and elk and bear and wolf, and slain all manner of beast. A state rifle and pistol champion a few times over in a few different disciplines. Now those experiences, it's not because I'm bigger or badder. Certainly not bigger. In fact, I met one of the patrons in real life, and he said something to the effect of, "I thought you'd be bigger." Reminded me of that William Wallace movie, where he's like, "Oh yeah, if William Wallace were here, he'd shoot lightning bolts out of his rear end." Well, I'm not William Wallace, but I am the person that did all those things in the bio. But not because I'm bigger or badder. I don't think that I survived when many other young, good men did not. I give all the glory and all the credit to God. All the talents and experiences that He's given me and the things that He's let me live through, I hope to use them to glorify God and to help you today. So if I boast in anything, it's not in my strength. It's in that God had mercy on me and saved me because He had a purpose for me. And hopefully I can use those talent, skills, and abilities to serve you today. What were some of the cutting edge and go-to duty guns for law enforcement, whether it be local, city, state, sheriff's department, the feds, things like that? That's what we're going to talk about today. Now, two that were common, the Beretta 92. You know that I think that is, if you've listened for any length of time anyway, you know that I think that's probably the best combat handgun made by human beings ever. Period. However, whether it's the best duty gun or not, I can't really say. There was a time when the double single actions reigned supreme in the world of duty guns. The Beretta 92 obviously won the military trial, the M9. It would have been the XM9 trials to become the M9, but a close runner-up was the SIG 226. Both of these were real common in duty use. Both are fantastic handguns. Also common and was also in common use was, it's considered a compact, but it's more of a full-size gun by today's standards, the SIG 229. And in fact, I, as you might imagine, carried a M9. I also carried a 229, just by happenstance. I never did carry a 226. Ironically, that is one of my go-to carry guns nowadays, a single action only, not the double single. But the 229 I did carry on duty. So both of those, and double single was real popular for a long time. In fact, it took a while for the striker fire train to get on the tracks and get rolling. For a while, the double single was real popular. Also, not me personally, but in circles and in the things that I saw, the Smith & Wessons were real popular. This predates the Smith & Wesson M&P. I'm talking about the Smith & Wesson, and there's a whole list, and you can go down a whole rabbit hole on all these. But there's a bunch of 2 digits, 3 digits, and 4 digit Smith & Wessons. The 59 all the way to the 5906 and a bunch of other ones, really popular. They're kind of a bomb-proof gun, just built like a tank. They kind of actually remind me of a tank. They're big. They're big metal machines, kind of known for being reliable and rugged, and just really good, solid guns. Now, I knew the CHP carried one of these tanks, and I looked it up, and it said the 4006. Smith & Wesson 4006. Again, there's a lot of numbers, and what the different variants of that are, I don't know. Again, that would be its own show. The Smith & Wesson, we could probably do a series. The 2-digit numbers, the 3-digit numbers, and the 4-digit numbers. But again, kind of built like a tank. CHP carried that gun a long, long time. Now, right around the 90s to the early 2000s, you started seeing this transition, I think sadly, to the 40 Smith & Wesson. And I don't want to get down a whole rabbit hole here, but I've never been a big fan of the 40 Smith & Wesson. There was a time when it was the hot thing. Everybody thought you had to have a 40 or 45, and a lot of this came out of the Miami-Dade shooting. You can look that up, but if you look up what happened that day, you might find a different conclusion than the FBI came to. Not that the 9mm was insufficient, but that they shot a whole bunch of rounds and hit the dude once. And that round, I think, hit him in the arm, went through the arm, and stopped very short of the dude's heart. That was one round. They hit him one time with a bunch of rounds fired. So I wouldn't fault the 9mm for that. But they seemed to think the 9mm was not good enough. Brief history lesson, they looked at the 10mm. They said it's pretty good, but it's too powerful, it's too big, hard to handle. Let's shorten it. Let's download it. And then we get the 40 Smith & Wesson. And my issue with the 40 Smith & Wesson is not so much in the caliber or the ballistics. It's actually not bad ballistically. My issue with it is that they took 9mm sized guns and crammed a 40 into it. And that can cause some issues. It can also, again, I've said this before, there's no free lunch. For every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. I think a 9mm sized gun shoots best with a 9mm. If you look at something like an STI in 40, they shoot great. Now, a 45 size frame, something like an STI in 40 is fine. Metal frame, heavy gun in 40 is okay. But when you start shoving it in a gun made for 9mm, I don't think the juice is worth the squeeze. And that's pretty much what happened. And that's what they did. Because on paper, that looks great. You take this Glock 17 and you shove a 40 in it. What's not to love about that? America. More power. The only problem is it throws off the gun. The gun was engineered pretty well for a 9mm. And it's a pretty high pressure round. Quite a bit of snap, which the 40 is kind of known for being a snappy round, especially in a light polymer framed gun. And I don't think it's worth it. That said, that was my first, I was issued and carried the M9 in the Marine Corps, and then I carried that was my issued duty gun, the Glock 22, and that was a real popular duty gun. I think one of the worst duty guns ever made, but hey, it was real popular. It's still real popular. Still agencies and stuff carrying the Glock 22 40 Smith & Wesson. I think that was never a good choice, and I'm glad we saw a swing back to 9mm. I did that swing way back in the day, back when people still thought you had to have a 40 or 45, and for a while I fell into that too. I never really fell in love with the Glock 22. A lot of people, I guess, fall in love with their first police-issued duty gun or something. I did not. I quickly got a Glock 21 in 45 because back then I thought caliber warrior, bigger, better, America. And I had a couple of Glock 21s. They're fine guns if you have hands like catcher's mitts. If you don't have giant, really big, like extra large hands, they're not a great gun. And I got into competition shooting. I've probably told this story before, but when I was a cop, before I joined the Marine Corps, way back before I was a cop, before I even joined the Marine Corps, I was doing a lot of rifle competitions. And I thought, if I'm going to get into a shooting, it's probably going to be with a handgun. If I have to defend my life, whether off-duty, on-duty, it's probably going to be with a handgun. So I should probably start competing with a handgun. And I started doing quite a bit of T&E testing and evaluation, and I could get a lot more hits on target a lot quicker. And I could also train more for the same amount of money with 9mm than I could with 45. I think, went to my first competition with a 45 and quickly realized, I don't care how much better you tell me. This was way back when, everybody thought 9mm was anemic and wouldn't work and was, a couple of notches above a pop gun. But I was putting rounds on target, and I thought, there's no way this makes sense ballistically that the 45 and 40 is more effective than a 9mm, just with the number of fast, accurate hits I can get on target in a given amount of time. So I switched to 9mm, back when everybody thought you had to have a 40. There was a brief period where the Wonder 9s, the high-capacity semi-autos were common. You still, even in the early aughts, mid-aughts, would see some people with Beretta 92s. Again, that was not real common. Most people thought you had to have a 40 or 45, but I quickly realized long before it was a tactical trend that I think 9mm is better. And it's not because I some kind of special wunderkind or something back in the day. It's just because I looked at the numbers and I put rounds on target. Actually compared them, doing stuff like bill drills at different distances, and I thought, the 9mm is better. So one of my carry guns, and this is, you got to remember, it wasn't that long ago when you didn't have a menagerie of polymer striker fired handguns to choose from. There weren't that many. You had Glock, and I remember when Smith & Wesson M&P came out, and I got a couple of those, and I thought, these are awesome. And I still, to this day, I think have more competition wins with a Smith & Wesson M&P than anything else. And one of my duty guns, because I carried the same thing I shot in competition, was a Smith & Wesson M&P 9 Pro. Pro meaning it had a longer slide. And that was one of my duty guns for quite a while. And other agencies adopted Smith & Wesson M&Ps. The Smith & Wesson M&P for military and police is a fine gun. It's a little dated now. I don't think I've seen, sadly, I love that gun, and I've got a soft spot for it. It was a great choice in the early aughts, the mid-aughts, whenever it came out. However, I don't think that it's kept pace with innovation. Again, there's a menagerie, a cornucopia of polymer striker-fired handguns. They come out all the time. The polymer striker-fired du jour, whatever the one of the day is. There's countless polymer striker-fired handguns. And a lot of them come out with some, not major game changers, but minor innovations here, minor innovations there. And I just don't think the Smith & Wesson M&P, although it's still a great, solid, good gun and a good duty gun, it hasn't really kept pace with the innovation. Kind of stuck in the mid-aughts. I know they came out with the Gen 2, but I actually like the frame of the Gen 1 better. The beaver tail on the Gen 1s is one of the things I liked about the Smith & Wesson M&P, especially for fast shooting and fast draws, and they got rid of that. To be fair, they gave it a better trigger too, but anyway, the Smith & Wesson M&P, that was adopted quite a bit. Those weren't the only games in town, though. Also, not uncommon, was the H&K USP. Now, the H&K USP kind of flies under the radar, but it's a fantastic duty gun. Again, probably back in those days, it would have been more likely to have been in 40, but those are great guns. The H&K USP, I think, way ahead of its time. I think if it came out today, people would be like, look at this crazy, awesome handgun. But I think kind of ahead of its time and underappreciated. Very manageable in recoil, even in a 40, I think, not bad. If you offered me a HK USP in 40 or a Glock 22, I wouldn't even hesitate. I'd take that HK USP, no problem. And unlike many other guns that were double single only, that was double single, or you could carry it hammer back, cocked and locked, safety on, like a 1911, which was awesome. Again, H&K USP, way ahead of its time. Very, very good duty gun. And it was a duty gun, although probably not as popular as a Beretta 92 or a Glock 22 or some other guns, but it's a great gun. If you see one of those for a decent price, those are fantastic guns. HK USP, they still make them, but you get a good deal on an old duty gun. HK USPs are awesome guns. But when I mentioned the Beretta 92, but there's also a Beretta 96, which is basically the Beretta 92 in a 40 cal. I don't like them as much because I don't like 40 as much, but they were a thing. They did exist. They're not real common, but basically a Beretta 92 in 40 Smith & Wesson, because that was the caliber of that era. That was like the main law enforcement caliber of the era. Also, we'll talk about kit a little bit. For a brief period in time, drop leg holsters were tactical. And I had a couple of drop leg holsters. Let me explain to you why they were a thing, really. Is because the body armor of the era, whether you were in the Marine Corps working on some kind of tactical team, you were like an obese Ninja Turtle when you wore the body armor. It was huge. You had Kevlar panels, plus you had ceramic sappy plates, which was like ceramic and steel torture device that you wore on your chest, and they were so big and so ridiculously bulky that if you had a gun on your belt, you couldn't readily access it because the body armor hung out so much. So what did you do? You dropped it down on your belt. Unless you're wearing 90s era, 2000s era body armor, or you have some other weird reason, stop with the drop leg holsters. They're not tactical anymore. They served a very specific purpose. Maybe people saw them in movies and thought they were a good idea, even if that criteria didn't apply to them. But strong side belt. Strong side belt is a better way to carry in almost every circumstance. The drop leg holster is for that scenario. So unless you're running and stuck with, 2000s era big, bulky, giant body armor, to stop with the drop leg holster. That's what that's for. But those were common back in that era for that reason, if you were ever wondering. Also real common duty rounds. If it was a 9mm, I remember seeing 9BP and 9BP LE, which we've talked about before. 9BP LE being a +P+. Maybe that was popular because it was thought that 9mm wasn't enough, and maybe agencies had spent the money on 9mm, so they were like, what's the hottest 9 we can shove in our guns? And if you're looking for a hot 9BP LE is a good one. It's a spicy meatball. It's I forget what the pressure is. Back when I was shooting a lot of it, I actually wrote to Federal to see what the pressure and stuff was, because I was shooting a lot of it, especially when I went to the FBI Academy to be an FBI handgun instructor. I was shooting a lot of that ammo, and stuff's hot. And I'd like to tell you what the numbers and stuff on that were, but I forget. But it was again, I remember 9BP LE and 9BP. 9BP is just the standard pressure load. Well, that was real common. Also common back in the day, if you were running 45, 230 grain HST or 230 grain +P HST. That's Federal HST, which stands for Hydra Shock 2, which preceded the Hydra Shock, or the Hydra Shock. Just the old school Hydra Shock. You'll know these if you see them. They got a giant post in the middle, which is supposed to do something with hydraulic effect or stopping clogging. It was an early attempt, I think. But the HSTs were pretty common by the time I was running, gunning as in law enforcement. You still might have seen some Hydra Shocks, but HSTs were on the scene then. And HST, I think, stands for Hydra Shock 2, to give you an idea. But those are real common. If it was 40, 180 grain, Hydra Shock was real common. Winchester Rangers, also pretty common. And actually, as much as I don't like the 40, the 180 grain HST is a good round. It's a good round in 40. ballistically. Again, I don't like that they shove it in a 9mm size gun, but in a bigger, heavier gun, which if you're carrying, on a duty belt, why not carry a little bit bigger, heavier gun? It's a good round. So if you're looking for if you're still rocking a 40, you might want to rock the 180 grain HSTs if they shoot good out of your gun. They're a good round. And this is not an exhaustive list, right? I'm sure there was other stuff. I'm sure there were other common duty guns. I'm sure people carried the 1911. People still carry the 1911. Certain departments still allow you to carry the 1911. LAPD, of which I was an officer, I never carried 1911, but they allow 1911s. They still do, and they did then. So I'm sure some were carrying 1911s. This is not an all-exhaustive list. This is just guns that I remember that were common at the time and that were common as duty guns in that kind of era. Back before you had all these new polymer striker-fired handguns, right? Long before the 320 was a thing. Long before the 365 was a thing. Long before the Walther PDP, way back in the day. These were common duty guns of the 90s and early to mid 2000s. It's kind of a blast from the past I thought you would enjoy. And another reason is you might want to keep your eye out for some of these guns. Some of these are really good guns. I was just in a gun store and I saw a couple of the old school two-tones, which is what I have, Smith & Wesson M&P, so old before they colored the slides black when it was just a stainless slide on a black frame. They had a couple of them in 40. I assume since there were several of the same make model, they were duty trade-ins from some agency. Under $350. That's a fantastic deal. And many of these you might get for a pretty good deal. So the thing about police guns is unless you get a dude that was like me in my latter days of police work that shot competition and shot a lot of those guns were carried a lot, so they look beat up, but they probably still have several lifetimes worth of use. Those guns were made to be used hard. That's one of the great things about a lot of these guns. They're hard use guns. So if you see one and it's a little bit worn on the outside, it still might be a great shooter and a good deal. A Smith & Wesson M&P for $350. I mean, especially considering what stuff costs now compared to pre-COVID prices. I'm often blown away what stuff costs now. My wife often gets on me. She's like, you're thinking about pre-COVID prices. Way back in the ancient of days when eggs were $3 or $4 per 60. When I would, that's a common meal for us. We generally get a flat of eggs, and a real common meal for us is 10 eggs a night. My wife will usually have one. And we go through a lot of eggs, so I've been buying flats of eggs for a long time. But pre-COVID, those hovered between $3 and $4 for a flat. 3 something to 4 something for a flat for a long time. Now they're what? They're not $3 or $4 for 60 eggs. So that said, prices have changed. But to see a gun like that of that quality for $350, that would have been a steal pre-COVID even. So there's a lot of those good deals to be had because the market's so flooded with new guns, and maybe keep your eye out for those if you're looking for a good hard use. They were made for hard use, made for adverse conditions, well tested. So if you're looking for a good bug out pistol or apocalypse pistol or something like that, an older duty gun that still has some life left in it might be a good choice. Anyway, with that, I appreciate you listening. Your tactical tip of the day. A real common knife you might have found in the pocket of a peace officer, law enforcement officer back in the day. The CRKT M16 is still a good knife. You're looking for a good, affordable pocket knife. If you like to use your knives hard and you're looking for a good, tactical, practical folder knife, again, you probably know that I carry a fixed blade knife generally. But if you're like most people and you carry a folder and you want a good, hard use, affordable folder, CRKT M16, there's a bunch of different models and makes. You get them like serrated, not serrated, Tonto, straight edge, partially serrated. There's different colors, bunch of different models. But that CRKT M16, it's been around a long time and it's still going because it's a good knife. I don't even own one, but I'm telling you, if you'd have done a pocket dump of some kind of law enforcement school that you had to go to back in the day, like a drug recognition expert or firearms instructor, and made everybody do a pocket dump, you probably would have found a CRKT M16 in there. They were a real popular knife, and they're still a good knife. So if you're looking for a good pocket knife and you're going to carry a folder, CRKT M16 has kind of stood the test of time. They're a good knife. With that, your tactical verse of the day. This is one I've been looking at quite a bit, and it's so good and so simple. Watch, stand fast in the faith, be brave, be strong. Let all that you do be done with love. What a great, simple, powerful verse. I'm going to read it again. Let it sink in. Watch, stand fast in the faith, be brave, be strong. Let all that you do be done with love. Amen.